Hi everyone, I'm here through the portal to share my life review, or a moment within my life review, which is a moment within my entire life experience where shall I say my mind faced solitary confinement in prison that led me to committing suicide. So, in this video, I would just like to share, the interdimensional physical perspective. What do I mean by interdimensional physical? Is that, when you cross over and you walk your life review, you get access into the multi-dimensions of your mind, your consciousness, your being, your body. So you actually see, how much you consist of and exist as on a mental level, so much more than most people are consciously aware of, today. So I'd like to share, because it was fascinating to observe what happened to my mind while I was in solitary confinement. And the reason why I'd like to share this is to assist and support, for those of you who are walking process, for example, to essentially grasp and understand, why it is so important to be grounded and stable in this physical reality, why it is important to connect with people, in physical interaction or communication, and most importantly, within it all, why it is also necessary and of necessity to reflect on your own thoughts, your own emotions, your own internal processes. So, look, in terms of solitary confinement, the consequences thereof, let's have a look at the consequences of it on a global scale. Prisons in themselves, any method of psychological or physical torture that's being used on, criminals or the enemy. All these methods, interestingly enough, when crossing over and understanding the mind more, and your programming, your life, and how everything shapes and molds and defines who you are and who you become as a person, you start realizing how all these methods of trying to control the human mind or human consciousness, when it veers off of from the morals of human society, human civilization, is that all these methods of control are actually quite primitive, in the sense that you start, with the access that we have, once we walk our life reviews. We see that, if I had the knowledge and information and understanding that I had while walking my life review, in my actual life experience, I would have been able to change my personalities, my thinking, my programming, be aware on such a level to realize the consequences of my thoughts, my actions, my who I was, how I was, why I was, how my genetic programming from my family lineage influenced my consciousness, my mind, to such an extent to shape me into the person that I had become, to lead to the actions that had where I ended up in prison, in solitary confinement. So what solitary confinement actually says, is that human consciousness or humanity had not yet reached the level of awareness, of understanding how the mind works, how consciousness works, how programming really works, to be able to change it, to give a person or people the opportunity to change within themselves. So instead, the mind or the consciousness or the programming is being punished. So it's like prison, solitary confinement, torture, all those methods of control is actually to control the mind, to control that which the majority of humanity cannot resolve, cannot solve, cannot actually find solutions for. So, that's an unfortunate consequence for me personally, and also collectively, But this is also what we're doing here through the portal to assist and support with bringing through that awareness of the fact that consciousness just has to be understood, the mind programming, and all its relationships and dynamics on a being level, on a physical level. You're getting into the multidimensional, interdimensional of our existence that does exist, but it's just not tapped into yet or understood and grasped. All right. So within that, that's just a bit of insight in relation to the existence of solitary confinement. And now I'd like to, go into sharing, what happened to my mind in solitary confinement. Why it is that when you are left with your own mind and, you're not in control of it in any way whatsoever, you have no comprehension or understanding of how your thoughts work, your internal conversations, your emotions, your feelings, your imaginations, your projections, your fantasies. Within that, they're not being simulated by your external environment, by everyday life changes. What happens to the mind is it almost inverts unto itself, and instead of your mind or your consciousness, your attention being spread out from within to the without and being connected to your external environment, being stimulated by it, because that's how your mind and your consciousness essentially evolves. It continues evolving, triggering, activating, shifting, moving, and changing, within you as you are participating in reality with people, in moments, in situations, and experiences, routines, things like that. We don't realize like how much our mind, our mental stability is dependent on our external daily life routines and moments and experiences. Like, that's really taken for granted. I mean, it's the same as, for example, someone who isolates themselves, tends to leave themselves to their own thoughts, their own mind, their own consciousness. And within that isolation and that seclusion, they can think themselves into possession, into a state of paranoia, psychosis. I mean, it is extraordinary, how people can create their own insanity within their own mind because of isolation, seclusion, and, within my experience, solitary confinement. So I'll leave you for here in this video. And in the next video, I will continue with explaining this importance in your mental or consciousness mind connection to your external environment, your communication, your interaction, people within it. Because that on many levels keeps your being, mind, and body relationship stable, grounded. And how that is actually an opportunity for you to learn more about your own mind, your own consciousness, to get into a relationship of control, if you will. Because, I mean, even within my experience, it's proven, I after a couple of days lost complete control of everything inside of me, in my mind. It went haywire. There was just chaos, and I couldn't get myself out of it, even though I was aware of what was happening in me. And that was the most scariest of it all, where I could see the insanity, I could experience it, but I couldn't voice, what my awareness to anyone in my surroundings, because my mind had completely taken over my being, my awareness. It's like I was locked inside myself, not being able to speak, but being very much aware of everything. All right, I'll continue more in the next video. Thank you very much.